Okay, let's try this again and hope conk out on me like the first one. Hello, football fans. Big Al here on this Wednesday, September 20th, 2023, and welcome to the week that was as I take a look at all the statistical numbers from every game of week two in the 2023 NFL season. And at the end, stick around for my week three power rankings, and there's a lot of change this week, including a new number one. I'll reveal that at the end of the video, so stay tuned. If you like football, comment and subscribe to my channel. Ring the bell, get notified every time I go live. All right, let's kick things off with Thursday night football. We'll begin with the Thursday night game. The Philadelphia Eagles beating the Minnesota Vikings 34-28. The Eagles are 2-0, and this week they will visit the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Monday night. The Vikings at 0-2 will host the LA Chargers on Sunday. The Eagles offense ran 71 plays for 430 yards, averaging 6.06 yards per play. 23 passes for 171, averaging 7.43. 48 rushes for 259, averaging 5.39. Philly had 24 first downs, 41 on the season. Third downs were 6 of 14, 42.9%. For the year, 10 of 27 for 37%. And 1-for-1 on fourth down in week number two. 1-for-2 for the season through two games for 94. Time of possession is 38 seconds. This puts the Eagles into ball hawk territory. A ball hawk, if you're new, is a team that possesses the football for at least 35 minutes, win or lose. All right, so in two games, the Eagles' offense are at 681 yards, averaging 340.5 per game, 325 passing yards, or 162.5, 356 yards rushing, averaging 178. The Eagles' defense records 38 tackles. They now have 86. Two more sacks at it brings their total to 4. They had 4 forced fumbles in this game, nearly a fifth, though. They're up to 6 now. Only 2 passes defense against the Vikings after they recorded 10 against the Patriots. That brings their total to 12. No interceptions, so they still have the 1 from the Patriots game. Same with touchdowns. The Eagles defense kind of getting off on a raw start. 756 yards allowed, 378 per game. 652 yards passing, 326 per game. 104 yards rushing. This is the bright spot here. They average an NFL leading 52 yards allowed per game on the ground. The Vikings had 44 passes for 346, averaging 7.86, and only 9 rushes for 28 yards, averaging 3.11. Minnesota had 19 first downs, 35 total, 6 of 10 on third down for 60%. On the year, 14 of 24 for 58.3%. 1-for-1 on fourth downs. That's their first fourth down play of the season. 2 penalties for 15 yards gives them 8 on the season through 2 weeks for 60 yards. Time of possession only 20 minutes, 32 seconds. Vikings offense at 743 yards, averaging 371.5. 674 yards passing, an average of 337, and only 69 yards rushing in 2 games, averaging 34.5, the lowest in the NFL. The Vikings defense records 50 tackles. Their season total was 95. They had 4 sacks in the game, bringing them to 5. Their first 4 fumble of the season was in this game as well. 3 passes defense gives them 9. They also added their first interception of the season and no defensive touchdowns. The Minnesota defense, 672 yards allowed, averaging 336. Yards passing, averaging 170. And 332 yards rushing, averaging 166. Closing line was the Eagles -6 over under 49. The two teams went over that total at 62 points. They combined for 804 yards and 124 plays, averaging 6.48 yards per play. Took the Eagles straight up 31-17. So I'm 1-0 straight up. And against the spread, I took the Eagles took Philadelphia -6. They pushed the total, so I'm 0-0-1 ATS. Next up, the Ravens and the Bengals. Baltimore wins Colts on Sunday, while the 0-2 Bengals will host the LA Rams on Monday Night Football. And we have another Monday night doubleheader in week 3. All right, the Baltimore offense records 70 plays for 415, averaging 5.93 yards per play. 33 passes for 237, averaging 7.18. 37 rushes for 178, averaging 4.81. The Ravens had 26 for 3% and 50% for the season on third down, 16 for 32. And the Ravens have no fourth down plays through games. The Ravens had 6 penalties for 56 yards, 19 total flags for 162. Time of possession was 33 minutes and 4 seconds. Looking at the Ravens through 2 games, 680 yards, averaging 340. 392 passing yards, averaging 180. 35 tackles, 81 total. Only 1 sack in this game, total to 6. No forced fumbles, they stay at 1. 6 passes defense, average or not average. Their season total is now 10. They had their first interception of 2023 and defensive touchdowns. The Ravens defense has allowed 550 yards, averaging 275 a game. 412 yards passing, or 206 per game. And 138 yards rushing, averaging 69 yards per game. For the Cincinnati Bengals, they ran 56 plays on offense for 282, averaging 5.03. Passes for 216, averaging 5.27. Downs, 25 total. 10 of 15 on third downs at 66.7%, and 12 of 30 on the season for 40%. 1 for 1 on fourth down against the Ravens, and 1 for 2 on the year. They had 5 penalties for 30 yards, and total 9 penalties for 50. Time of possession, 26 minutes, 56 seconds. Bengals offense, only 424 yards. That's a 212 average. 283 passing yards, averaging 141.5, and 141 rushing yards, averaging 70.5. The Bengals defense had 52 tackles, 99 on the season. 0 sacks in this game. That keeps them at 3. Same with the forced fumbles. They had none, so they remain with the 1. 3 passes defense. They now have 8. No interceptions or touchdowns, but they do have 1 INT from the Browns game. Bengals defense has allowed 765 yards, averaging 382.5. Okay, 381 passing yards, averaging 190.5. 384 rushing yards, averaging 192, which is very, very bad. Closing line was Cincinnati -3, over under 45.5. The two teams combined to score 51 points, finishing over the total, plus 697 yards and 126 plays, averaging 5.53 yards per play. I did take the Bengals to win straight up 24-21, 1-1 straight up now. And I had Baltimore plus the 3 points, and they won by 3, so they pushed the total. That makes me 0-0-2 against the spread. Up next, so it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 27 and the Chicago Bears 17. The Bucs are now 2-0. They host the Philadelphia Eagles on Monday night, while the 0-2 Bears will travel to Arrowhead to face the defending Super Bowl champion Chiefs. So both teams playing the 2 participants of Super Bowl 57 in Week 3. Tampa Bay's offense records 68 plays for 437, averaging 6.43, 34 passes for 317, averaging a cool 9.32 yards per pass, and 34 rushes for 120, averaging 3.53. Tampa Bay had 19 first downs, 35 on the season, 8 of 15 on third downs for 53.3%, and 14 of 32 for 43.8%. They went 1-for-1 on fourth down for the second week in a row, and they are now 2-for-2 on fourth down this season. The Buccaneers had 7 penalties for 54 bucks in ball hog territory. Tampa Bay's offense, 679 yards, averaging 339.5. 486 yards passing, averaging 243. And 193 yards rushing, averaging 96.5. Tampa's defense records 30 tackles. Season total was 78. 6 sacks in this game brings them to 8 on the season. 1 forced fumble gives them 2. 7 passes defense gives them 10. 2 more interceptions pushes them to 3, and they scored their first defensive TD of the season. The Bucs defense, 605 yards allowed, averaging 302.5. 497 yards passing, 248.5 average. 108 yards rushing, 54 average. The Bears offense ran only 45 plays for 236, averaging 5.24. 29 passes for 169, averaging 5.83. 16 rushes for 67, averaging 4.19. Chicago had 14 first downs, 36 on the season. 6 of 13 on third downs for 46.2%. And for the year, 9 of 26 for 34.6%. No fourth down plays for the Bears offense in this game. They remain 1-for-2. 5 penalties for 28 yards. This gives them 12 flags for 89. Time of possession was 24 minutes and 4 seconds. The Chicago offense only 547 yards, averaging 273.5. 358 yards passing, averaging 179. 189 yards rushing, averaging 94.5. As for the Bears defense, 48 tackles in the game, 87 for the season. 0 sacks for Chicago's defense, keeps them with 1 for the season. That was in the Packers game. They've recorded their first 2 forced fumbles of 2023. They also had 2 passes defense, bringing their season total to 5. No interceptions or touchdowns through the first 2 weeks. So pretty much this defense has been quiet. All right, yards-wise, Chicago's has allowed 766 yards, averaging 383. 554 through the air, 277 average. 212 on the ground, 106 average. Closing line was Tampa Bay minus 2.5 over under 40.5. The two teams barely finished over that total at 44 points. They combined for 673 yards and 113 plays, averaging 5.96 yards per play. I took Tampa to win 24-16, 2-1 straight up. And I also took Tampa Bay minus the 2.5. They won by 10. They covered 1-0-2 as my ATS record. Next up, the Atlanta Falcons edging out the Green Bay Packers, 25-24. The Falcons, off to their first 2-0 start since 2017. They are off to Detroit this week to face the Lions, while the 1-1 Packers will have their home opener against Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints. The Atlanta offense ran 77 plays for 5, averaging 7.34, 45 rushes, 27 first downs by the Atlanta offense, brings them to 40 on the season. 6 of 15 on third downs, 40%, 8 for 25 for the year for 32%. And they had their first fourth down plays of 2023, converting 3 out of 4 for 75%. The Falcons had 6 penalties for a whopping 110 yards and 12 total for 153. Time of possessions. The Falcons offense flying high early on, 667 yards, averaging 333.5, 326 yards passing, averaging 163, and 341 yards rushing, averaging 170.5. The Falcons defense records 30 tackles. Their season total is at 68. They added another sack to their season total, which is now 3. No forced fumbles in the game. They have the one from the Carolina game last week. 5 passes defense for 9 on the season. No touchdowns or interceptions, but they do have 2 INTs from the Carolina game. Falcons defense, only 505 yards allowed. So they have exceeded expectations. They're averaging 252.5 yards per game. 267 yards passing at 4.2 at 133.3 rather passing yards allowed per game, and 238 yards rushing at 119 per game. The Packers offense ran just 46 plays for 24, averaging 4.87, 140 yards on 25 passes, averaging 5.6, 84 yards on 21 rushes, averaging an even 4 yards per run. Sorry, my neck. 3 of 9 on third down for 33.3%. That hurts their season total at 12 of 25 for 48%. 7 penalties for 40 yards, and in total 16 penalties for 130. Time of possession, real low at 23 minutes, 45 seconds. And this Green Bay offense not putting up the numbers. Only 523 yards, averaging 276.5. Sorry about that. 307, 188.5, and only 176 yards, average of 82 games. Green Bay's defense, 51, 101 total for the season. 1 sack in the game. That's their. Now I got a plane flying over my house. They added another interception. That's their second of the season. And no defensive touchdowns, but they did have one against the Bears last week. Green Bay's defense has allowed 757 yards, 378.5 average, 424 passing yards, 212 average, 300 yards, 1-3, over under was 40.5. Total points was 49, as this game goes over 40.5. 670 yards and 123 plays by the two teams. Combined average for 5 yards per offensive play. I took Green Bay to win 27-20, and I also took ATS record is 1-2-2. Next up, the Indianapolis Colts defeating the Houston Texans 31-20, but the win does come at a price. Rookie quarterback Anthony Richardson of the Indianapolis Colts did leave this game with a concussion. The Colts are now 1-1. They go to Baltimore on Sunday to play the Ravens, while the 0-2 Texans are off to Duval County to face the Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's start with the Indy offense. 56 plays, 353 yards, 6.3 yards per play, 33 passes for 227, averaging 6.88, 23 rushes for 126, averaging 5.48. Indy had 19 first downs and 37 on the season. They finished 6 for 12 on third downs at 50%. For the season, they're 8 for 24 for 33.3%. No fourth down plays for the Colts offense. They stay 1 for 5 on the season. 8 penalties, however, for 42 yards brings their penalty count to 12 for 77. Time of possession was 25 minutes and 2 seconds. Indy's offense, 633 yards, averaging 316.5. 442 yards passing, averaging 221. 191 yards rushing, averaging 95.5. The Colts defense records 57 tackles. Season total is now 108. They had an impressive 6 sacks against C.J. Stroud on Sunday. Their season total is that puts them among the league leaders in sacks. 1 more forced fumble in the game gives them 4 through 2 games. 2 passes defense gives them 5. No interceptions or touchdowns. They have 1 of each in week 1. Indy's defense, 731 yards allowed, averaging 365.5. 574 passing yards, averaging 287, and 157 yards rushing, averaging 78.5. The Houston offense records 74 plays for 389, averaging 5.26. Passes for 337, averaging 7.17. 27 rushes for only 52 yards. The average was a putrid 1.93 yards per run. Houston had 24 first downs, 42 on the season. They finished 9 of 19 on third downs for 47.4%, and for the season, 16 out of 37, 43 on fourth down, and for the season, 3 of 6. Not a lot of flags caught against the Texans, just 3. Time of possession nearly put the Texans in ball hog territory. They missed by 2 games, averaging 328.5, 503 yards passing, averaging 266.5, and only 124 yards rushing, which is an average 62 yards per game. The Texans defense records 38 tackles, 79 total this year, 0 sacks in a game, all 3 of their 2023 sacks. That was against Baltimore. 1 forced fumble brings them to 2. Same with the passes defense. They had 1 this week and now 2 this season. No interceptions or touchdowns. They have 1 of each in week 1. Texans defense has surrendered only 618 yards, 309 per game. 382 passing yards, 191 per game, and 236 yards rushing, 118 per game. Closing line was Houston -1, over was 40.5. The 2 teams finished with 51 points, so they shot well above the Vegas total. They combined for 742 yards and 130 plays, averaging 5.71 yards per play. Picked the Colts to win 23, so I'm now 3-2 straight up. And I also won with the Colts with the 1 point against the spread. That makes me 2-1-2 ATS. All right. The Kansas City Chiefs defeated Jacksonville Jaguars in a rematch of their AFC divisional playoff game from last January. 17-9 is the final as the Chiefs win their first game of the season. They are 1-1. And next up, they host the offensively challenged Chicago Bears. The 1-1 Jacksonville Jaguars will host CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans next week. The KC offense ran 63 plays for 399, averaging 6.33 yards per play. 41 passes for 298, averaging 7.27, 22 rushes for 109. The Chiefs had 19 first downs and 36 in 2 games. Third down conversions for 13, 30.8%. For the season, just 9 of 27, 33.3%. And they would convert their first 2 fourth down plays of the season, 2 for 2. Chiefs were hit hard with the flags. They had 12 for 94 yards and now 15 in 2 games for 119. Time of possession is 31 minutes and 49 seconds. All right, so the Chiefs offense is at 715 yards, 357.5 per game. 524 yards passing, averaging 262. 191 yards rushing, averaging 95.5. Sorry. The Kansas City defense records 37 tackles. Their season total now at 4 sacks on Lawrence this win of the season, and 6 more passes defense brings them to 10. They have no interceptions or touchdowns on defense in the first 2 weeks. Chiefs defense, 639 yards allowed, averaging 319.5. 447 passing yards allowed, averaging 223.5. And 192 yards rushing, averaging 96 yards. As for Jacksonville, their offense ran 60 plays for 271, averaging 4.52. 42 passes for 197, averaging 4.69. 18 rushes, 74 yards, averaged 4.11. The Jaguars had 18 first downs, one fewer than the Chiefs, and 38 total through 2 weeks. They were 3 of 12 on third down, and for the season, 6 of 24. Both Jacksonville was 0 for 2 on fourth down, and for the season, 1 for 5. Jaguars only had 2 penalties for 10 yards. That brings their total to 6 in 2 games for 55. Time of possession, 28 minutes, 11 seconds. Offensively, the Jaguars have amassed 613 yards, 306.5 per game, 434 through the air, averaging 217, 179 on the ground, averaging 89.5. The Jaguar defense records 41 tackles, 90 total this year in 2 games. Added 1 more sack, bringing their total to 5. They also had 2 forced fumbles. That's 4 for the year. And 8 passes defense brings their season total to 13. They added another interception, their second of the season, and no defensive touchdowns. Jacksonville's defense, 679 yards allowed, averaging 339.5. 513 yards passing, averaging 256.5, and 166 yards allowed on the ground. That's 83 per game. Closing line was KC -3, over under was 50.5. And this was the lowest point total on the board. This was the 2 teams combined for 26 points. So this game finished well below 50.5. 670 total yards and 123 total plays. Combined average yards per play is 5.45. I picked Kansas City to win 28-24, so that makes me 4-2 straight up. And I took the Chiefs at -3, and they won by 8, so covered us. Next up, the Buffalo Bills annihilating the Las Vegas Raiders 38-10. Both teams are now 1-0 on Sunday, or should I say the surprising Commanders. The Raiders week, Kenny Pickett and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Bills quarter yards per play. 37 passes for 267, averaging 7.22. And a very impressive run total, 35 rushes for 183, averaging 5.23. The Bills had 29 first downs, and all told they have 48. The best third down team in the NFL in 2022, back up to their tricks again in 2023. They finished 7 of 13 on third down for 53.8% for the season. They are 12 of 26 for 46.2%. And they would make their first fourth down plays of the season, 4 in total, in which they convert 3 for 75%. Buffalo had 4 penalties for 30 yards and 9 total penalties for 70. Time of possession, 40 minutes and 4 seconds, putting the Buffalo Bills well into ball hog territory. The Bills' offense through 2 games, 764 yards, 280 on the ground, averaging 140. Buffalo's deep records only 27 tackles and 65 total in 2 games. No sacks this week. They stay at 3. 1 forced fumble. That's their second of the season. 6 passes defended brings them to 8. And again, planes flying over my house. 2 more interceptions gives them 3, and no defensive touchdowns. Buffalo's defense, 529 yards allowed. That's 264.5 on average. 302 passing yards, 151 on average, and 227 yards rushing allowed, 113.5 average. The Vegas offense ran just 39 plays for 240 yards. So they really didn't have too many opportunities with the football. They averaged 6.15 yards per play, though, which is pretty good. 24 passes for 185, averaging 7.71. 15 rushes, 55 yards, averaging 3.67. Only 13 first downs in this game for Las Vegas. That brings them to 35. They were 3 for 7 on third down for 42.8%. And all told this year, 8 of 18 for 44.4%. No fourth down plays in the game against the Bills, but they are 1 for 1 for the year. And despite getting blown out, the Raiders played a clean game. Just 2 penalties for 30 yards. They now have 12 for 127. Time of possession, not good. 19 minutes, 56 seconds. So this is a 3-1 edge in time of, or rather a 2-1 edge in time of possession and in first downs for the Buffalo Bills in this game. Raiders defense, 500, or Raiders offense, rather, 501 yards, averaging 250.5 per game, 385 through the air, averaging 192.5. And now we can talk about the Raiders defense. 56 tackles total, 96 on the season. 2 more sacks puts them to 4. No forced fumbles yet in 2 games. 2 passes defense brings them to 3. No interceptions or touchdowns. Vegas's defense has allowed 710 yards, averaging 355, 433 yards passing, 216.5 average, 277 rushing, 138.5 average. Closing line was Buffalo -7, over under was 46.5, and they barely made that as the 2 teams combined for 48 points, 690 yards, and 111 offensive plays, averaging 6.22 yards per play. I took the Bills to win 34-27. I'll take the win here. That's 5-2 straight up. But I did take Vegas plus the points. I was expecting a closer game. I took Vegas +7 and I lost. So now I'm 3-2 ATS this week. All right, next up, we've got the first of 3 overtime games this week as the Tennessee Titans outlasted the Los Angeles Chargers 27-24 in the extra stanza. Tennessee goes to 1-1. They're off to Cleveland to face the injury ravaged Browns, while the 0-2 Chargers will visit Minneapolis to face the 0-2 Vikings. All right, Tennessee's offense ran 58 plays for 340, averaging 5.86 yards per play. 24 passes for 200, averaging 8.33. 34 rushes for 140, averaging 4.12. The Titans had 22 first downs, 37 through 2 games, 6 of 13 on third down for 46.2%, and 8 of 25 for the season at 32%. They attempted their first fourth down play, which they did not convert. That makes them 0-1. Tennessee had 7 penalties for 45 yards, and for the season, 13 flags for 90. Time of possessions, 36 minutes, 49 seconds, and this puts Tennessee in ball hawk territory. Their offense, 625 yards, averaging 312.5. 381 yards passing, averaging 190.5. 244 yards rushing, averaging 122. The Titan defense records 43 tackles, 91 total in 2 games. There I am. Okay, they had 3 more sacks this week, bringing their season total up to 7. Lucky number 7. No forced fumbles in the game. That brings them to 2, or rather keeps them at 2. They had 2 passes defense in this game. That's now 7 on the season. No interceptions or touchdowns, but they did have an interception in the loss to New Orleans last week. Tennessee's defense has given up 693 yards, 346.5 average, 563 passing yards, 281.5 average, and only 130 yards rushing allowed. That's 65 per game. The Los Angeles Chargers ran 62 plays for 342, averaging 5.52. 41 passes for 281, averaging 6.85, and only 61 yards on 21 rushes, averaging 2.9 per rush. 19 first downs for the Chargers. That's 49 on the season. They were in a abysmal 2 of 14 on third down this week, 14.3%. Their season numbers through 2 games is 11 of 29 on third down for 37.9%. Fourth downs, 3 for 3. Perfect. 100%. 3 of 4 for the season, 75%. LA had 4 penalties for 45. 480 passing yards. That's an average of 240, which I didn't write down the average here. That is 147.5 rush yards per game for LA Chargers on offense. Defensively, they had 45 goals this year. 5 sacks in this game on Ryan Tannehill. Big part because Tennessee's offensive line is so bad, and that's their first 5 of the season. The Chargers still don't have a forced fumble in 2 games. Only 1 pass defense in the game. That's 11 for the year. No interceptions or touchdowns. They did have 1 last week. Now the Chargers defense, terrible. 876 yards allowed. That's 438 per game. 666 passing yards, 333 average. And 210 yards rushing allowed, 105 average. Closing line was the Chargers, minus 2.5. Over under was 45.5. The 2 teams went over that number at 51 points, 682 yards, and 120 plays. Average is 5.68 yards per play. I picked Tennessee to win 23-20, so that moves my straight up record to 6-2. And I took the Titans plus the points, so I won that game as 4 wins, 2 losses way through the schedule. You're watching the week that was, as I'm running down all the statistical numbers from week number 2 in the National Football League, and stick around to the end as my week 3 power will be revealed. And as I said, it's full of change. We have a new number 1 and a new number 32 team, so stick around till the end for that. All right, back to the recaps. The final of the early games on Sunday saw the Seattle Seahawks beat the Detroit Lions in overtime 37-31. Both teams are now 1-1 on the season. The Seahawks return home Sunday to host the Carolina Panthers, and the Lions will host Desmond Ridder and the Atlanta Falcons at Ford Field on Sunday. We'll start off with the Seattle offense. 66 plays for 393, averaging 5.98, or rather 5.95 yards per play. 41 passes for 311, averaging 7.59. 25 rushes for 82 yards, averaging 3.28. Had 28 first downs, 41 through 2 games. 5 of 11 on third down for 45.5% for the season. 7 of 20 for 35%. And they went 1-for-1 on fourth down. I forgot to write their season numbers in, but that's okay. The Seahawks had 9 penalties for 80 yards, 16 total for 135. Time of possession, 33 minutes, 31 seconds. The Seahawks offense, 573 yards, averaging 286 points, passing 80.5. The Seahawks defense ran 49 tackles, bringing their season total to 96. They had their first 2 sacks of the season and their first 2 forced fumbles. 3 passes, bringing their season, had a pick six in this game, an interception and a touchdown, bringing their season total up to 4. Also, touchdown. Seahawks defense has given up 844 yards, ouch, averaging 422 per game. 650 passing yards at 375 or 320. 325 on average per game through the air. 194 yards rushing given up. That's 97 per game. Detroit's offense ran 62 plays for 418, averaging 6.74. 35 passes for 316, averaging 9.03. 27 rushes for 102, averaging 3.78. 44 through 2 games. Third down, 6 of 11, 54.5%. Real good. Overall, 11 of 25 for 44%. Fourth downs were 1 for 3 for the second straight week. They are now 2 for 6 in that category, both at 33.3%. Detroit had just 4 penalties for 24 yards, 8 total penalties for 87. Time of possession was 30 minutes and 48 seconds. Lions offense off to a good start, 786 yards, averaging 393 per game. 566 passing, that's 283 per game. And 220 rushing, that's 110 per game. The defense records 50 tackles, 91 through 2 games. They had their first sack of 2023. They still have 1 forced fumble after not recording one this week. 2 passes defense brings them to 7. 4 touchdowns this week, but they have 1 of each from week 1 against the Chiefs. They have 54.5 per game. 537 passing at 268. Closing line was Detroit minus 4.5, over under 47. Closing line was Detroit minus 4.5, over under 47. Both teams shot that total out the sky as the two combined for 68 points, which would tie for the highest scoring game in the league this week. 811 yards and 128 plays, averaging 6.34 yards per play. I picked the Lions to win 3 minus the 4.5 points. So that's another L, 4-3-2. That brings us to the 4 o'clock games on Sunday. Starting off with the New York Football Giants, who trailed 28-7 at one point. Scored 24 unanswered points, including 17 in the fourth quarter, to beat the Arizona Cardinals 31-28. Now, this matches the largest come-from-behind win in New York Giants history. Of course, the last time they were down 21 points and won was all the way back in 1949. And the team they played, the Cardinals, who at the time were based in Chicago. New York goes to 1-1 on this season, and they will play tomorrow night in less than 24 hours against the San Francisco 49ers. And they're missing 2 of their offensive linemen. And I'm not sure if Saquon Saquon Barkley is going to play on Thursday as he injured his ankle late in the Cardinals win. Arizona is now 0-2, but they're a very game 0-2. But they better put their big pointy pens up because next week, Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys. Let's start off with the Giants offense. 64 plays, 439 yards, averaging 6.86 yards per play. 37 passes for 312, averaging 8.43. 27 rushes for 127, averaging 4.7 per run. 26 first downs, 40 total in 2 games. Very good on third down. 7 of 12, 58.3% for the season. 12 of 28 for 42.9%. And they are really, really good on fourth downs. They are now 4 for 6 on the season after converting another fourth down play on Sunday. New York had 9 penalties for 75 yards and 15 total for 147. Time of possession is 29 minutes and 23 seconds. Giants offense in 23, 610, averaging 305 per game. 375 through the air, averaging 305 per game. 375 through the air, averaging 187.5. And 2 defense, 44 tackles. Season total is now 77. Okay, they have no sacks through the first 2 games of the season. No forced fumbles game either. They still have the one from the Cowboys loss. 2 passes defense gives them 6. And just as they have no sacks this year, the Giants defense also has no interceptions or touchdowns. New York's defense has surrendered 644 yards, averaging 322. 371 through the air at 185.5 on average, and 273 on the ground at 136.5 on average. For the Arizona Cardinals offense, 60 plays for 379, averaging 6.32 yards per play. 31 passes for 228, averaging 7.35. They ran the ball very well in this game. 29 rushes for 151, averaging 5.21 yards per run. The Cardinals had 24 first downs and 37 through 2 games. They went 4 for 10 on third down for 40%. For the season, they're 8 for 24 for 33.3%. And no fourth down plays this week. They are 0 for 1 on the season. Arizona had 8 penalties for 57 yards, and on the season, 17 flags for 179. Time of possession, 30 minutes and 37 seconds. Arizona's offense records 589 yards in 2 games, averaging 294.5. 342 passing yards, 171 per game, and 247 rushing yards, 123.5 per game. Tackles, their season total is now 90. 3 more sacks in this one gives them 9 on the season, so they're among the league leaders in sacks. No forced fumbles, however. They remain with the 2 from the Washington game last week. And just as they had 7 passes defense against the Commanders, Arizona's defense added another 7, bringing them to 14. 1 more interception this week. That's their second of the season. And no touchdowns this go round. They do have the one in the Washington game. Cardinals defense is at 687 yards, 343.5 yards per play, or 345. Yeah, that's right. 343.5 yards per game is what I meant to say. 468 yards through the air. That's 234 allowed per game. And 219 yards on the ground. That's 109.5 allowed per game. Closing line was New York -5. Over under was 40. and they went well above that at 59 points. The two teams combined for 818 yards and 124 plays, averaging 6.6 yards per play. I took the Giants to win straight up and against the spread. I got the straight up pick right, but I lost the ATS pick as the Cardinals only lost by 3. So they ended up covering as the home on 4-4-2 ATS. Okay. Next up, the San Francisco 49ers continue their regular season dominance of the Los Angeles Rams as they won at SoFi Stadium 30-23. San Francisco's off to another 2-0 start. They play on Thursday night against the New York Football Giants, who we just talked about. Meanwhile, the 1-1 who may not have Joe Burrow playing, we don't know yet. Starting off with the Niner offense, 53 plays for 365, averaging 6.89 yards per play. 25 passes for 200, averaging 8.24, and 28 runs for 159, averaging 5.68. San Francisco had 21, 22.2%, and 8 for 22 on this for 36.4%. No fourth down plays for the 49ers. They are 1 for 1 in that category. They had 6 penalties. Session was 26 minutes and 49 seconds. Through two games, the Niners offense is at 756 yards, which is an average of 378. 409 yards through the air, 204.5 average. 7 on the ground, 173.5 average. Niners defense records 48 tackles. They have 1 sack in this game. That brings them up to 6. They have no forced fumbles through 2 games. Passes defense gives them 11. 2 more interceptions puts their total up to 4. And no defensive touchdowns thus far. San Francisco's defense, 625 yards allowed, 312.5 average. 495 through the air, averaging 247.5, and 130 on the ground, averaging 65 yards allowed. LA, and I did not do that right. They averaged 297 yards passing on 55 attempts. That's 5.4 yards per pass. That's 55 through 2 games, 58.1%, 18 of 31. Fourth down, 1 for 2 on Sunday, 50%. And for the season, 2 for 3, 66%. LA had 6 penalties for 55 yards and 13 total for 108. Time of possession offense for the Rams, 812 yards for this game. That's not on the season. They recorded their first forced fumble of 2023. Only 1 pass defensed in this game. That's their second of the season. And LA has no defensive touchdowns or interceptions. Okay, the Rams defense, 545 yards allowed. That's awesome. Averaging 272.5 per game. 301 passing at 150.5 per game. And 244 rushing at 122 per game. Closing line was San Francisco -7. Over-under was 45. The two teams go a touchdown and a 2 over that at 53 points. 751 points or 751 yards and 130 plays, averaging 5.78 yards per play. Closing line was, I read that already. My straight up pick was the 49ers 35-20. And I also took San Fran -7. I won the straight up pick and I pushed the ATS. So now I'm 4-4-3 in my ATS picks. Jets trying to adjust the line minus Aaron Rodgers, who they lost 4 plays into the season opener against the Bills, but they did come. Aaron Rodgers, who they lost 4 plays into the season opener against the Bills, but they did come back and win in week number 1. However, in week 2, the Jets were not so fortunate as they get beat up by the Dallas Cowboys 30-10. Dallas is off to a 2-0 start, and they're off to the desert to face the Cardinals, while the 1-1 Jets host the New England Patriots, a team that Bill Belichick has owned over the years. Let's start off with the Dallas offense. 82 plays for 382 yards, 48 on 38 passes. That's a 6.53 average, and 44 total this year. Finished 50% on third down on Sunday, 9 of 8 for the year, 15 of 31, 48.4%. 31, 48.4%. Dallas 38 yards, 11 total penalties for 73. Time of possession, listen to this, 42 minutes and 15 seconds. Clearly in ball hawk territory. And they may be the front runner for the top ball hawks. Dallas's offense, 647 yards, averaging 323.5. 391 passing, averaging 195.5, and 256 rushing. They are tied with one other team, which we'll be talking about here shortly. The Cowboys receptions in this game brings their season total to a league best 5 INTs. No defensive touchdowns this week. They have one against the Giants. Cowboys defense, the least. 386 yards, only 193 per game. Only 214 yards allowed through the air, which of 107. And 172 allowed on the ground. That's an 86 average. Jumping over to the New York Jets offense. 43 plays, 215. That's a 5-yard average per play. 151 on 27 passes, 5.59 average. 64 yards on 16 runs. That's a 4-yard average. Yeah, this offense was not good. 12 first downs. 12. That gives them 25 on the season. Third downs, also not good for the New York Jets. And it shows in these numbers. 504 yards through 2 games. That's a 252 average. 268 passing. That's New York's defense. 65 tackles. Their season total is 118. They did manage to sack Dak Prescott once. That's their 6th of the season. They also forced their 2nd fumble of the season as well. 2 passes per game. 465 passing. That's 232.5 average. And 231 rushing at 115.5. Closing line, Dallas -8. They barely went over that number at 40 points. 597 yards, 125 total plays. Average is 4.76 yards per play. I took the Cowboys to win straight up 24-17. So that pushes my straight up record to. But I did take the Jets plus the 8 points. They ended up losing by 20. So Dallas covers. Now my ATS record is. Okay. That's it for that one. All right. The final Sunday afternoon game for week 2 was the Washington Commanders coming back from 18 down to beat the Denver Broncos 35-33. Now, if you watch the end of this game with 3 seconds left to pull the Broncos to within 2. Then, as the Broncos were going for 2 in attempts to send the game to overtime, there was a interference. There was some pass interference against the Commanders that was never called, and Washington walked out of Denver with the win. Washington is 2-0. They're back home to DC on Sunday to host the Buffalo Bills. While the 0-2 Broncos take the cross-country trek down to South Beach to face Tua Tagovailoa and the Miami Dolphins. Let's start off with the Commanders' offense. 62 plays for 388, averaging 6.26 yards per play. 39 passes, 266, averaging 6.82. 23 rushes, 122, averaging 5.3. Washington had 26 first downs and 47 through 2 games. Third downs for 30%, and for the year, 7-22 for 3 in this game. The Commanders had 8 penalties for 71 yards, 16 total for 140. Time 33 minutes, 45 seconds. Washington's offense through 2 games has 636 yards, 318 average. 422 through the air, averaging 211, and 214 on the ground, averaging 107. The Washington defense records 35 tackles, 78 through 2 games. 7 more sacks for this Commander defense. That brings their season total to 10, tied with the Dallas Cowboys for the most sacks in the NFL. 1 more forced fumble gives them 3. 4 passes defense gives them 7. They had their first interception of 2023 and still no defensive scores. Washington's defense, pretty good too. 609 yards, 304.5 allowed per game. 391 passing, averaging 195.5, and only 218 rushing, averaging 109. On to the Denver Broncos offense. 55 plays for 399, so they actually outgained the Commanders in this game. Average is 7.25 yards per play. 277 on 32 passes, averaging 8.66. And they had the same rushing numbers as Washington, 23 for 122 and a 5.3 average. But they had 5 fewer first downs than the Commanders with 21, 43 total through 2 games. They were slightly better on third down, 4 of 12, 33.3 for the year, 9 of 23 for 39.1%. Fourth downs, a perfect 2 for 2, and those were their first 4th down plays of 2023. Denver had 9 penalties for 58 yards and 19 total through 2 for 141. Time of possession, 26 minutes, 15 seconds. The Broncos defense had 43 tackles, 74 through 2 games. They had their first 4 sacks of the season, their first forced fumble of the season. 4 more passes defense gives them 9. No interceptions or touchdowns this week, but they do have the 1 interception from 1.5. Closing line, Denver -4, over-under is 39. And both teams nearly got there themselves, but they combined for 68 points. This ties the Seahawks and Lions for the highest scoring games in the NFL this week. 717 plays, averages 6.7. I took Washington 27-12 straight up. That puts me at 10-3. And I took Washington plus the 4, but since Denver only lost by a couple, they cover the spread. 4-6-3 is my ATS record. Now to Sunday Night Football, where the Miami Dolphins took down the New England Patriots at Foxborough 24-17. All right, so Tua Tagovailoa is now 5-0 in his career against New England. The Dolphins are now 2-0. They will host the Denver Broncos next week, while the New England Patriots at 0-2 look to continue their dominance against the New York. Let's start off with the Miami offense. 60 plays for 389, averaging 6.48 yards per play. 30 passes for 244, averaging 8.13. 30 rushes for 145, averaging 4.83. The Dolphins had 22 first downs and 52 through 2 games. Third down conversions, 4 for 10, 40%, and on the year 8 of 19 for 42.1%. No fourth down plays for Miami's offense this week. They are still 1 for 1 through 2 games. The Dolphins had 6 penalties for 46 yards and 12 total for 84. Time of possession, looking at the Miami offense, 925 yards, averaging 462.5 yards per game. That's tops in the NFL. 710 passing yards. That's 355 per game. Also tops in the NFL. And 215 rushing, averaging 107.5 per game. The Miami defense records 51 tackles and 108 through 2 games. The Dolphins had 3 sacks last week against the Chargers. They also had their first forced fumble and the year, and 6 passes. Defense gives them 7. The Dolphins D has no touchdowns. All right. Miami's defense has allowed 721 yards, 360.5 average, 399. Defense ran 67 plays for 288 yards, averaging 4.3 yards per play. 42 passes for 200. That's a 4.76 average. 25 rushes for 88 yards. That's a 3.52 average. England had first downs and 47 through 2 games. The Patriots were good on third down, 7 of 15, 46.7%. For the year, 12 of 30 for 40%. Fourth down, the Patriots went 1 for 2 against the Dolphins, and on the season, they're 2 for 6. New England had 5 penalties for 45 yards, and for the year, 12 for 95. Time of possession, 29 minutes and 41 seconds. Through 2 games, Patriots offense, 506 yards through the air, 253 average, and 164 on the ground. And 164 on the ground for 82 on average. The Patriots defense had 43 goals, total of 80 for 2 games. 1 sack in this game brings them up to 4. 0 forced fumbles. They have the one in the Philadelphia game. 3 passes defense gives them 7. And they also had their 640 a game. 398 through the air, averaging 199. And 242 on the ground. Closing line was Miami minus 1.5. Over under was 46, and they just missed out by a handful of points. The 2 teams combined for 41 points, 677 yards, and 127 plays, averaging 5 points. I took the at minus 1.5 points. They won by a touchdown, so Miami covers the spread. 11-3 straight up, and 5-6-3 ATS. Panthers at 0-2, hit in a row. They're headed to the land of the 12s to face Geno Smith and the Seahawks. The New Orleans offense ran 70 plays for 41, averaging 4.87 yards per play. The Panthers, and 14 of 32 through 2 games, both for the Saints. Only 3 penalties this week for 52, 10 total for 77 in 2 games. Time of possession, Saints offense, 692 yards in 2 weeks, records 38 tackles and 75 through 2 games. 4 more sacks by this ferocious Saints defense. That gives them 7. Their first forced fumble of the season was in this game as well. 2 more passes defense puts them up to 13. They have no interceptions or 2, but they do have the 3 picks against the Tennessee Titans in week 1. New Orleans defense, 524 yards allowed. That's 262 per game. 320 through the air. That's 160 average. And 215 total for 101. Time of possession, 27 minutes, 11 seconds. Panthers offense, 520 and 254 rushing, 127 average. The Carolina defense records 43 tackles, 87 through 2 games. 4 more sacks this week gives them 8. No forced fumbles. That keeps them at 1. 7 passes defense brings their season total to 11. They had their first interception of the year and no touchdowns yet. Panthers defense playing pretty good. 562 yards allowed, 281 average, 298 passing, 149 average, 264 rushing, 132 average. Closing line was New Orleans -3. I have the Saints 26-17 straight up. So that's this week. And the final game of the week was also on Monday Night Football. That had the Pittsburgh Steelers defeat the Cleveland Browns 26-22. Not only did the Browns lose the game, but they also lost star running back Nick Chubb for the remainder of the season after suffering a very, very gruesome. That's 21 straight. Pittsburgh is now 1-1, while the 1-1 Browns host Ryan Tannehill and the Tennessee Titans. All right, offense, 51 plays for 255. They really couldn't get anything going offensively for the most part, but they did average 5 yards per play. 30 passes for 200, averaging 6.67, 21 rushes for seconds. Steelers offense is not parts rushing. The Pittsburgh 7, they added 6 more sacks. That brings their season total up to 9. 4 more forced fumbles. So they were like the Eagles on Thursday. A lot of fumbles. They now have 7 on interception and 2 defensive touchdowns in this game. The first play of the game was an Alex Highsmith 30-yard pick 6 for a touchdown. And then the last touchdown scored by the Steelers was a fumble return by TJ Watt. So that's how they got the 2 defensive scores. Steelers defense has allowed 799 yards, 399.5 average, 413 through the air, averaging 206.5, 386 on the ground, averaging 193. 75 plays for 408 yards, averaging 5.44 yards per play. 210 yards on 40 passes, averaging 5.25. 198 yards on 35 rushes, averaging 5.66. Cleveland had 24, averaging 202 per game. But I think those numbers are going to suffer now that Chubb is out for the season. Cleveland's defense puts them up to 10. Their Cleveland's defense has only allowed 390, averaging 198 passing. That's an average of 133.5 and 130 yards for 48, 20 picks. So at the end of all this, I finished 5, 7, and 4 in my ATS picks. That's a win percentage of 438. And for the season, I am 14, 14, and 4, 500. Straight up this week, 12-4 here in week number 2, 751 percentage. And 21-11 so far this year, 656 win percentage. Minutes and 15 seconds. Across the league, there were 796 points scored this week. And through 2 weeks, 1,430. At number 31 is the Houston Texans. Number 30 is the Arizona people thought they would be. They're 0-2 and previously 30 seconds. Number 29 is the Carolina Panthers, also at 0-2, previously at 28. This week's number 28 is the Denver Broncos, also 0-2, previously at 27. Number 27 is the New York Giants, 1-1, previously at 25. 20 Vegas Raiders, 1-1, previously at 24. The next two teams had the biggest drop the Los Angeles Chargers and the Minnesota Vikings, both 0-2, fell to 25. The Vikings fell to 24. On the other side of the coin, the Indianapolis Colts is tied for the big jump this week, and that's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 2-0. Previously at 29, they moved 8 spots, just as the Colts did. Up a spot to number 20, despite the loss to the Niners, is the LA Rams at 1-1, previously at 21. Number 19, previously at 23, were Commanders at 2-0. Down from 15 to 18 this week is the top 10 at number 9, and down to 16 is the Cleveland Browns at 1-1. The New York Jets, just like the Browns, 1-1 record, and also dropping from the top 10. They fell from 7 to 14. The Atlanta Falcons, also 2-0, moved up 7 spots to 12. Jaguars slipped a spot out of the top 10, down to despite their 8-point loss at home to the Chiefs. And they traded spots with the Detroit Lions to move up into the top 10. 2 to number 9. The 1-1 Seattle Seahawks, 2-0 Miami Dolphins are at number 7, up 5 spots from last week. In a row, down 2 spots to number 6. Moving up to number 5. The Baltimore's at 2-0, number 4, and it's the same top 3, but in a different number 3 with a 1-1 record. And then the San Francisco 49ers at 2-0 fell to number 2. Way for the Dallas Cowboys to take the top spot this week, also 2-0. And that, my friends, is it for the week 2 edition of the week that was, plus my week 3 power rankings or television schedule for, and then I'll be back plus the maps for all the Sunday afternoon games, the announcers for every game, and we'll run through the power rankings once again then. So join me tomorrow for that. In the meantime, like and enjoy the pigskin.